Well, hello and good morning, and welcome to Sunday Morning Coffee with Dr. Childress. Um, Look at the size of this coffee mug today. This is a Dr. Childress size coffee mug, just in case you're wondering about coffee. Uh, I was thinking, um, I'm hoping that someday they discover some health benefits to coffee because if they do, yay! If it's longevity, I'm going to be like Methuselah or something because I don't drink cups of coffee. It's more like pots of coffee a day. So, welcome to Sunday Morning Coffee with Dr. Childress. I'm in a little valley right now between completing work for the APA convention there in Seattle. It's coming this week, and then not having anything to do for the coming Seattle convention yet. Things are about to become very active, but it's the Sunday before they become very active. And all of this has been all of my planning beforehand, and then all of my work after has been kind of focused on this as the transitional day. Everything has to be done by Sunday, and then Sunday a new kind of experience starts. So I'm just going to take some time this morning and talk about things that interest me about the APA coming to Seattle. This is kind of an interesting video too because it's time limited. The next Sunday, my talk will be over, and so this APA in Seattle by next Sunday, it's going to be a done deal. But some of the stuff I'll be talking about today is the stuff that kind of interests me that kind of continue on and um, create ripples, basically of events. So this Sunday, I'll be talking. APA is coming to Seattle. Now I don't travel. Okay, I'm done traveling. I've seen everything. I've seen all the world I want to see. I'm perfectly fine exactly where I am, and I don't want to. There's a variety of reasons I don't want to leave. So this is my last convention conference thing, and I can think back way back to when I was starting out in my career, and you going around to the doing the talks at the conventions, and even more recently I've been doing the things as I was getting established in the family courts, but this is kind of the last one, so this will be interesting for me to kind of go, and I get to walk to it. Oh my goodness, I just take the ferries across and walk over up to the convention. So that's going to be interesting. I can walk everywhere, which is really weird, which just seems to be the term of the zeitgeist. But it is really weird for me. I can walk to a baseball game. I can walk to the APA convention. I walk to my doctor's offices like I walk everywhere. So for a Southern California boy, born and raised in automobiles, yeah, it's just really weird. So I'll be walking over to the APA on Saturday, a couple of days actually, but Saturday is when I give my talk. So I'll be waking up bright and early and catching the ferries over to the real world, and then doing a talk at 9 o'clock. That's going to be interesting. I've seen my slides; they're interesting. I'm trying not to be too disturbing, but I can't help but be somewhat disturbing because the information is interesting. So, and then I have two posters there as well. Melanie Greenham, she's coming up, and she put together and the submissions and put together both the articles and then the poster presentations on this. And one of them was with the Dorsey data. So Dorsey's on one of those poster presentations as an author on the data, and I like that data because it's my associated clinical signs data, the ACS. We looked at it in Dorsey's custody resolution method. We had 46 families who were involved in court-involved custody conflict, and we looked at for the 12 ACS, the 12 associated clinical signs that I said are often present. And sure enough, they are often present. Everybody had at least five or more. 45 of the 46 families had, I think, eight or more of the 12 ACS. That's a lot. And what I see those as, the associated clinical signs, those are like baseball analogy. Those are like calling my home run to left field. I'm pointing out to left field and say, I'm going to hit the home run out to left field here. And I'm going to hit it in section 203, row 15, seat 12 in the cup holder. Okay, that's how specific, like things like saying use of the word forced. I am predicting a particular word will be used, forced or fake. That one. Oh, my parents being so fake, in that situation, or a liar. That ACS. I'm predicting specific words and specific sentences. We should let the child decide on custody. That's ACS too. And sure enough, boom. And that is science. Science, you develop a model, a predictive, and then you make a prediction based on your model. Then you collect the data and see if that prediction, and if the prediction of your model works, then your model is accurate, which the 12 ACS absolutely shows. So we've not only got the article coming on ResearchGate, but now the APA poster on the same thing of my ACS data. Yay! And that's proves that an attachment-based model of parental alienation foundations, okay, the Greenham, Childress, Bruder data proves that's an accurate model. I knew it ahead of time. Everybody should, but that's wonderful. So I got an APA presentation, all this APA stuff coming on this week that will be so exciting to do. And then Melanie's coming up, and we'll have stuff to do. And I'm planning to do a video on Friday. So another person's coming in from out of town. Sit down with Melanie, and I want to just do a conversation, Melanie and Greenham and I, on the issues in the family courts. She takes a more, she's on the public health domain. I'm a clinical psychologist. And so we have different perspectives on the same issue. So we're both in the same physical location. I thought it'd be good to have a conversation. We'll have that conversation. It'll be filmed up, and it'll get to YouTube later. And that's on Friday. And so Friday's a busy day. And then Saturday we have that stuff. And there's a couple of seminars I want to check out as I get in there. But today's Sunday. So today I've just finished all my handouts and everything. They're all posted, and I'm starting up. And so now I got a big cup of coffee and kind of organize my day. But I wanted to talk with you today about an interesting aspect of what's going to happen at the APA. Interesting for me as a psychologist. Because there's both the issues that are of direct relevance to the families in the courts. How do we solve the custody but there's also a larger issue about what's happening within the profession of psychology relative to the family courts. We're in a paradigm shift. Forensic custody evaluations have been the dominant paradigm, complete failure. We need to return to clinical psychology, and that's the paradigm shift that's taking place. And so it's very interesting to watch that kind of happen. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today, is a little bit of the paradigm shift that's going to be clicking into place this coming week. So starting with, I'm going to be telling them, this is your differential diagnosis. So pull this slide from the talk. This is a differential diagnosis. And this is like going forward, this is the differential diagnosis. We got the, allied parent who's saying that the targeted parent is abusive, and it could be physical abuse, sexual abuse, neglect abuse, or psychological abuse. Well, let's assess that and decide if that's true. On the flip side, we have the targeted parent who's saying it's the allied parent who's abusive. And they're saying it's a persecutory delusion shared. It's a false factitious attachment pathology, which is child psychological abuse, and then the spousal partner abuse, psychological abuse of the targeted parent using the child as a weapon. So we have two litigants, each making counter allegations of a differential diagnosis. And that's clinical psychology. Now, the issue is these forensic psychologists don't diagnose anything. Okay. That's a serious, serious problem. Okay. But when I say, hey, you're not diagnosing things, they say, we don't diagnose pathology. We do something different. Well, as I'm sitting here as a clinical psychology, that's going to result in your loss of license. If you don't diagnose child abuse, that's a failure in duty to protect. Well, we would diagnose child abuse. Well, guess what? Are you diagnosing the delusional thought disorder? Are you diagnosing the factitious disorder? Are you diagnose? How many times have you diagnosed that in your career? Zero. And that's the only possible. It's going to be child abuse one way or the other. Oh, do I have to educate you about the pathology? If I have to educate you about the pathology, that means you're not competent to begin with. That's an ethical violation. I don't know what they're going to do about it, but that is the differential diagnosis. I'm sorry. And that's like reality. And it becomes really, really important because the contingent visitation schedule that I'll be talking about is about treating a factitious disorder imposed on another. Okay. It's not about treating all the actual child abuse. It's about treating the false attachment pathology. So if it's a factitious disorder, and a false attachment pathology being imposed on the child for secondary gain to the allied parent, and they're doing it by creating this shared persecutory delusion in the child, that's child psychological abuse. If that's the diagnosis, then the contingent visitation schedule is the treatment for that. It will resolve that diagnosis. However, yeah, there it is. However, if it is actual child abuse, then that is not the treatment for that. So it is exactly the wrong thing to do if it's authentic child abuse, and it is the right thing to do if it's false attachment pathology, if it's the child psychological abuse by the allied parent. So then the question becomes, what is your diagnosis? And that's just part and parcel of talking about the contingent visitation schedule, because it's diagnosis guides treatment. Oh my gosh, I shouldn't have to educate a doctor about that, should I? So diagnosis guides treatment. This is not the treatment for authentic child abuse. This is the treatment for the false factitious attachment pathology, the child's psychological child abuse. Okay. Now, you do diagnose the child abuse, don't you? Because the only thing that causes severe attachment pathology is child abuse, one way or the other. So in all of your cases, you should be returning a diagnosis of child abuse one way or the other, right? So what we'll be talking about today is when you return the diagnosis of FDIA, which you do, right? And no, they don't. They don't diagnose pathology. They don't even know how to diagnose the delusional thought disorder or anything. And they don't even actually know it is a delusional thought disorder and a factitious disorder. So, oh my gosh, I have to educate them about what the pathology is in order to have a professional level discussion with them about that. Oh, that's just because I would suspect that's extraordinarily embarrassing for them. I remember back in my day, when I'm working schizophrenia with Dr. Nectarline, and we're going to the APA to present some research about schizophrenia, we don't have to educate the doctors in the room about what schizophrenia is. They kind of already know. Or when I was working with Jim Swanson on ADHD and preschoolers and stuff, and we would be going to the APA doing something on ADHD in preschoolers. We didn't have to educate the doctors in the room about what ADHD was. Or if you're doing the talk on autism, you don't have to educate the doctors about autism or eating disorder. The doctors know what the pathologies are. But here in the talk today, or next Saturday, I'm going to need to educate the doctors about what the pathology is, but I'm not going to do that. Okay, so that's not the point of the talk. My talk is not to educate them about what they should already know. I'm talking about treatments, a contingent visitation schedule and that's a treatment for the factitious attachment pathology, the child psychological abuse by the alive parent that they don't diagnose, which is like failure and duty to protect. And so I don't know what they're going to do with that information. It's like Google ignorance, lack of knowledge or information. So if I have to educate them about then they are ignorant by definition of the English language. And that's kind of embarrassing for them, I would suspect. But I don't know. But that also means that they're incompetent, they're ignorant, they don't know that oh geez, 2.01's ethical violation. If you have to be educated about the pathology, that's a violation of 2.01. And I don't have to say a word on any of that because it's just part of we're talking. If this is a factitious disorder, do this. If it's not, don't do that. Then what's your diagnosis? Yikes, cowabunga. So now here's the issue. Here's the interesting issue. That's just like openers. Okay. Here's the interesting issue. There is now a conflict of interest within forensic psychology. Because if the forensic psychologists now begin to become competent and learn the pathology and begin to diagnose the shared persecutory delusion and FDIA, if they start to do that now, then they admit they misdiagnosed the pathology this entire time. And they also admit that they were not competent and were unethical this entire time. And they also admit that their forensic custody evaluations have been a complete failure and need to end, which means their careers are over because that's the only thing they do. And they admit that they were participants in the child abuse and spousal abuse and failed in their duty to protect obligations because they didn't diagnose the child abuse this entire time. So if they switch now and start making the diagnosis of child abuse, which it is, and the shared delusion and factitious, if they actually start practicing at a professional level now, they admit they weren't before. Yikes. I don't know what they're going to do with that, but that's kind of the reality they're sitting in. And if they start doing the right thing and start diagnosing the child abuse and start practicing at a professional level, start applying actual real knowledge instead of euphemisms of made up pathology labels, if they do that, then they admit they were ignorant, lack of knowledge or information, because they had to learn what the pathology was that they didn't know before. And they admit that they were unethical before, a violation of 2.01 and 2.04, because they didn't know the knowledge they needed to know for competence. And they admit that they were incompetence, that they were failed to do something successfully. And negligent incompetence, did they fail to take proper care and fail it? And then they admit that they were participating in the child and spousal abuse because of their failure and duty to protect obligations. Yikes. Now, what's interesting for me here as a clinical psychologist is that as a clinical psychologist, I know what the pathology is, and the forensic psychologists and the Gardner PAS experts, those two groups of people are symptoms of the pathology. Okay. They're not actually doing what they think they're doing. There are symptoms of the pathology, and the entire field of forensic psychology was created by the pathology. Wow. A pathology created an entire field of psychology. That'll be my next APA presentation. When you come back to Seattle and like I'll be like 80 years old or something, but when you get back to Seattle, that'll be my next one. How the pathology created an entire subdiscipline of psychology to hide itself. Oh my gosh, that's incredibly manipulative. Yeah. Machiavellian levels of manipulation. This pathology is off the charts. However, what we're looking at now, though, is if they admit that they misdiagnosed the pathology, they're going to be in a lot of trouble. Or their alternative choice is that they can continue to not diagnose a shared persecutory delusion in FDIA, and they can continue to not diagnose a child abuse and spousal abuse, and they can continue to try to hold on to their careers conducting pointless and worthless forensic custody evaluations that solve nothing. And so what we have currently, this is very interesting. What we have currently is a group of psychologists who are disabling the mental health system response. And I will assert that there are forensic psychologists with names who are intentionally disabling the mental health system response to the pathology in the family courts, its diagnosis and treatment for their own financial and career status gain. Because the moment they do acknowledge that, their careers are over because they do forensic custody evaluations and they admit that they misdiagnosed it the entire time, and they admit that that the forensic custody evaluations are a failed approach, and that's the only thing they do. So they don't want to return to clinical diagnostic assessments. Well, would accurately diagnose a pathology and accurately diagnose a child abuse and spousal abuse and get it treated, because then their careers are over and they're shamed because of their unethical and problematic practice before. Now, I identify at this point, I say there are forensic psychologists with names. I know who they are. I've been here 10 years. Okay, I know who they are. Now, I can name them. You can find them. Just look at the top echelon of forensic psychologists. Whoever is at the top, they're the ones who are disabling it, because they're the decision makers. If they switch and say, we're going to do clinical diagnostic assessments and offer those to the courts, then that's what happens. But they don't. They say, we're going to give the courts only our forensic custody evaluations. We're not going to do clinical diagnostic assessments because we don't know how to do them, and because I would admit that we didn't do it all the time. And oh my goodness. So it's easy to identify them. I just want to point out, though, I did that with this, the petition to the APA. So I identified the ethical violations and remedies and stuff, and hand delivered this into the APA, signed by 20,000 parents. Now, everybody thinks, oh, I'm trying to be some sort of advocate and get the APA to do something back in 2018. No. Yes, but I knew that kind of weren't. I knew they're going to send it off to the people who are disabling the mental health system response. Okay. So whoever the APA gave this to are the people with names who are disabling the mental health system response. Because here we have a description of the ethical violations, of the competence violations. So what did they do about it? Whoever you gave this to, what did they do about it? The ethical violations. They are the ones who are disabling the mental health system response. So now that's easy peasy. Just find out who you gave it to. So now I'm presenting at the APA. If the APA wants to know, how did things get so bad? Who'd you give this to? And you'll find out by name, because they're the ones who didn't do anything. And they have obligations under 1.04 and 1.05. This is my 1.05 response. I'm doing my ethical mandatory obligation standard 1.05. I notified people. So what did they do? So that's going to be an interesting question. Oh my goodness! And I just don't. I'm just talking about the contingent visitation schedule. If you want to fix it, we can fix it. And then just looking with the New York Blue Ribbon, an independent review of forensic custody evaluations. By an 11-9 margin, a majority of commission members favor elimination of forensic custody evaluations entirely, arguing that these reports are biased and harmful to children and lack scientific and legal value, and at worst can be dangerous, particularly in situations of domestic violence and child abuse. It's not saying that that's an independent review of forensic custody evaluations lack scientific and legal value, harmful to children, dangerous. Oh my goodness. And that's what they're doing. And that's what they've been doing for 40 years. These members reached the conclusion that the practice is beyond reform and that no amount of training for the courts, forensic evaluators, or other court personnel will successfully fix the bias, inequity, and conflict of interest issues that exist within the system. So right now we're sitting directly in the conflict of interest issues. Okay. So we need to switch from a failed paradigm of forensic custody evaluations to back to healthcare, back to diagnosis and treatment, and get grounded again in the application of established knowledge. And there are people in the upper echelons of psychology, professional psychology, the APA, the AFCC, the professional psychology people who are disabling that, who do not want a diagnosis and treatment to fix the problem because they're got their financial investments and their career on forensic custody evaluations that solve nothing. And I urge everybody, listen to the discussion of the New York Blue Ribbon Commission findings regarding forensic custody evaluations. They're extraordinarily problematic, and I review them. I agree with the summary. Here's what needs to happen. Diagnostic assessment with consultation. This is a clinical solution to clinical psychology solution, a healthcare solution to the pathology in the family courts. You have two litigants down there at the bottom. You have two litigants. Each is making allegations of child abuse by the other, potentially also spousal abuse allegations. But you got at least the child abuse allegations. One by the symptoms, maybe with verbal allegations. Other just saying it's a false pathology, factitious disorder, and delusional, persecutory delusion. So we got two cross allegations. Now we're going to need a clinical diagnostic assessment of which parent is abusing the child. This is going to be a disputed diagnosis. I mean, bring that up, make that point very, very clear. This will be a disputed diagnosis because it's going into the legal system. We know that. The appellate system for a disputed diagnosis is second opinion. So let's get the second opinion right at the start rather than delaying. There could be possible child abuse. We can do the second opinion with telehealth. We do second opinions all the time in healthcare. That's just standard because it improves the quality of services delivered. That's why we do it. So this is a healthcare clinical psychology solution to what you have in the family courts. So you have two litigants. You're going up to let each one of them appoint a second opinion consultant in telehealth. You just log in the computer and you can be there. And then that diagnosis and treatment plan goes back for the court's decisions and then also moves out into the treatment plan. So what this looks like is this. Okay, that's the whole structure of things. This is not a proposal by Dr. Childress. This is how healthcare would handle your pathology in the family courts. You don't have this because you have a forensic psychology solution. They do something different. You should ask Saul and Simon or Deutsch or anybody you want in forensic psychology. Ask Saini to come up with his approach from a forensic psychology model of how the solution gets done. This is a healthcare solution. So going back all the way to like all the doctors in history, back to the Greek doctors and people, Hippocrates or whoever, the all of healthcare is based on diagnosis and treatment since time immemorial, and it's been pretty successful. So we have the court issue. We got two litigants. It moves into the diagnostic assessment with the two consultants. Then that diagnosis feeds back into the court system for the court's decision making, but it also feeds forward into the treatment because we always land on treatment, which is a major failure of the forensic psychologists. Is they don't treat anything. They landed on the custody decision. That's not where the landing point is. It's on the treatment. And for the treatment, we need the diagnosis. So even if you don't diagnose the pathology at your custody evaluation, we're still going to need a diagnosis for the treatment plan. You landed at the wrong point. We need a treatment plan, which is clinical psychology, which means that we need the diagnosis. So we need to get back grounded. Forensic psychology is a failed experiment in service delivery. They experimented on parents and children and the courts, and they were allowed to do that. And they only gave them one choice, their experimental method for service delivery and for evaluation. And it was a complete and total failure. And as a result, the lives of thousands and thousands of children and parents were irrevocably destroyed because of their failed experiment. We need to get back to clinical psychology. We need to get back to diagnosis and treatment. Okay? We need to move this into fixing things. It is always in the child's best interest to fix the problem in the family. It is always in the child's best interest to restore bonds of loving affection between the child and parents. So let's do that. Let's just fix the problem, whatever the problem is. Let's get an accurate diagnosis. Is it authentic child abuse, authentic attachment pathology by the targeted parent? Well, then let's fix that and then fix the bond. Or is it a false, factitious attachment pathology being imposed on the child by the pathological, narcissistic, borderline, dark, allied parent? If that's the case, then let's fix that. But we need the diagnosis, and they're not giving us a diagnosis, which is extraordinarily problematic for them. So that, what you're looking at right there is the solution to your issues. So as soon as you want to solve your problem, you can solve it. But that's going to involve some very uncomfortable admissions regarding what has been happening and your failures prior to this. And so if you're not willing to kind of face up to accountability and responsibility, and if you're looking to cover up what happened in the family courts, then you're going to continue to participate in the spousal and child abuse until you don't want to do that anymore, until you want to stop the child abuse and stop the spousal abuse in the family courts. The moment you want to do that, it's easy peasy. Diagnosis guides treatment. Get a clinical diagnosis. Oh, you don't know how to do that. Well, you need to get educated on that, which means you need to admit that you were not educated before, that you were incompetent before, that you were unethical before. And that's your conflict of interest issues. So that is a very interesting situation that just kind of ripples out. And I don't necessarily need to do anything about that because I know what the pathology is. I know what the solution for it is. It's them that don't know. Them that don't know what the diagnosis is. And it's so complex and confusing. No, it's not. It's very simple. Well, it's so hard to treat. No, it's not. It's very simple. It's just you're incompetent. It's not a big issue. There's only two reasons for failed treatment. Either misdiagnosis, you misdiagnose and you're treating cancer with insulin, or you're not competent in the delivery of the treatment for that diagnosis. Because if you have an accurate diagnosis and you're competent in delivering the treatment, it's going to be fixed. So either one or both. Either you've misdiagnosed the pathology, you're not competent, or maybe both. I would suggest both. Okay. But I'm not incompetent. I know what the pathology is. I know how to fix it. So you can either fix it or not and continue the child abuse and spousal abuse. And this is a motivational pathology. It's in the attachment system. It's motivation. Forensic psychologists were captivated. They're part of the pathology. Gardner PAS experts, they're the they're part of the pathology. They're both of those are allies to hide the child abuse. One, the forensic psychologists hide it from or disable the mental health system response. That's their role. And the Gardnerian PAS people hide the child abuse behind their made up pathology labels. So they're both coordinated parts of the pathology in the family courts created by a narcissistic borderline dark manipulation pathology. Holy cow, the forensic psychologists are part of a pathology and they don't even know that. Clinical psychologist in Wonderland. So with that, I'm going to head off to my relaxing Sunday before everything starts to become so interesting. Curiouser and curiouser as I fall down a new rabbit hole, it appears. So with that, I'm going to head off to my Sunday and